Welcome back to Closing Conversations, the show for founders, leaders, and sellers who win together. I'm your host, Max Notis. Today, we're talking about a part of sales that quietly runs everything: compensation. You get it right and your team moves in one direction. Get it wrong and you get chaos, shadow accounting, and your best reps checking LinkedIn. My guest is Antoine Fort, the co-founder and CEO of Qobra, a sales comp platform used by high-growth teams that are done with the spreadsheet errors and delayed payouts. Antoine's an engineer turned revenue operator who's seen hundreds of plans, the good, the bad, and the over-engineered. We're going to dig into simple plans that actually drive behavior, how to use accelerators and decelerators without hurting margins, why paying on a monthly or a quarterly or annual targets creates a really healthy rhythm, and how realistic quotas, real coaching, and pipeline volume keep sellers confident and buyers convinced. Let's get into it. I think that'll be the best. So I guess, Antoine, for our listeners, do you want to just tell me a little bit about yourself and then we'll kick into things?
Yeah. Hi, Max. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. So I'm Antoine, co-founder and CEO at Qobra. We are a sales compensation software built 5 years ago. So I was born in France. I'm living in France right now. That's a bit about me. I'm from an engineering background and then got into sales compensation.
Let me ask then, you have an engineering background and you got into sales compensation. How the hell did that happen? Like, where did that transition come?
I've always loved math, physics, and that's the reason why I studied engineering. And also realized that while I was progressing in university that I was also really made for doing business. I really liked that. I really enjoyed having a business impact. And so, I grew up with my father, who is an entrepreneur, and I grew up with the stories about him selling his own software to his clients over the years. So I did kind of a dual track with the entrepreneurship and sales classes, and started to dig in a lot, questioning for alumni of the school who were in a sales leadership position or CEOs, entrepreneurs, and I was just basically, and that's because of my engineering background, I was asking them, okay, what are your problems? What do you need someone to solve? And I tried multiple different angles. And one of the things that struck me quite quickly, actually, is they were telling me managing my sales team is a pain. They're always complaining. They're always asking. They are leaving very, very early. I almost just hired them. They are already leaving. And yet they are the people that cost me the most money. So I thought, okay, there's something to do here. And digging again, I just found out that one of the key elements leading to this frustration was on both sides. So, from the management point of view, but also the sales reps, was the compensation, sales commissions, that for most cases were handled in spreadsheets. And while it was handled in spreadsheets, there was multiple errors coming up, reps not understanding anything. That was just a pain. So my engineering brain at that moment, who liked to talk, who liked to do business, thought, okay, there's something that we can solve. And then with my co-founders, Axel and Tanguy, which are in charge of the product and the tech, so CPO and CTO, we found out how to solve it through a great piece of software.
So this is interesting. So you have this engineering background. Your father's an entrepreneur. So this is something this isn't like ice for you to break. This is something that's been in your world forever. And as you start learning multiple sides of the business, as opposed to just, starting theoretically physics, all that stuff into engineering, you go into the world, you start learning about sales, and you start hearing about sales teams that are breaking essentially because they're not getting paid appropriately. Is that what it is?
It's a mix of a few different things, and to be very accurate, the problem as I saw it was sales reps, they have errors in their payouts. So yes, they are not paid appropriately. And the reason is because all the process that goes from deals they close through the sales compensation plan that was established by the management, all this process is falling through the cracks with problems everywhere because some data doesn't go in the spreadsheet, and then some formulas inside the spreadsheets are broken. And so in the end, they don't get paid appropriately. So it creates a lot of frustration from the reps, but it's also very frustrating for the CFO, for example, because he knows that the payouts are not correct, and he sees that it's a big line on the P&L. It's a big expense. Because when you have 30, 40, if not hundreds of sales reps, that's a lot of money. So everyone is feeling really uncomfortable with that situation, with spreadsheets. And there was also legacy solutions that are not adapted anymore to companies, at least in the mid-market segments. That's the initial problem.
So well, let me ask, and I'm not trying to poke a hole. I'm curious to understand this. And it makes sense. If I'm a salesperson, I join a new company. It's a big deal. Like I'm putting my faith in this company. I'm putting my livelihood, my family's livelihood and income into your organization, that your product can do what it says it's going to do, that your company operates efficiently. There's a lot of trust going into this. And I start closing deals and I'm not getting paid what you told me I was going to be getting paid. That's an immediate problem, right? That is an absolute reason that people leave. It's crazy to me that in this day and age, companies are still relying on spreadsheets that can move, that can break, pretty easily to handle something so complex. Are CRMs, for example, not doing this? Like this seems like a massive market gap for you to attack, which is why I assume you started Qobra. But is it Excel or nothing, or are there other entities that are trying to do this?
It's a very interesting question because when I was building the company, that was the question that I was hearing most of the time. People will tell me, "Wow, but doesn't exist?" The answer is yes, it does exist. So actually, in 2005, there's a company called Exactly that was created. So then this company became public 10 years later and got acquired by Vista Equity in 2018 for around 600 minutes. So they're not the only one. There was a few others. There were like 2 or 3 that were owning the biggest market shares. And more recently, we've seen companies that have raised a lot of money, created around the time Exactly got acquired, and who grew really quite fast. So to give you an example, there's a company called Spiff, created in 2017 or 2018, that then got acquired a year ago, actually maybe a year and a half, if not 2 years ago, by Salesforce. And this market was not spreadsheets or nothing, but what we realized was that most of these solutions, at least the legacy ones, were really suited for very enterprise businesses. So LinkedIn is using Exactly for sales compensation. But when you are LinkedIn, you have an army of people that can handle very complex tools and processes for you. And if you're not LinkedIn, you probably are not able to have such internal resources. So it's going to be harder for you to implement an enterprise tool in your company. So that was really the gap in the market. And multiple companies like Spiff, us, and others are trying to fill this gap with different approaches, different market segments, different perspectives. And the key thing that makes all this very interesting right now is RevOps as a discipline is really booming. So it creates an enormous market that was not existing 10 years ago that just needs to be addressed. And that's why we have us, Spiff, and other companies that all are able to grow and to thrive in this environment, while it was probably completely impossible 10 years ago because the market was not ready.
That makes a ton of sense. And here's where I'm going. Like, if you have an SMB company, it's probably pretty like standard. This type of deal is this kind of payout. And maybe you don't even have to rely on a spreadsheet. Like it's just that simple that you see what the person's revenue is every month and that's what they're getting paid. Like pretty blank. But when you get up to, a larger, more complex enterprise deal, payout is inherently more complex. So it makes sense to me that, similarly, I sometimes say like a startup company is saying we need a CRM, and I'll say like, don't use Salesforce. You don't need all of that. Like it's like a fortress. Whereas a bigger company, you're going to need that because you're going to have a lot of things that are coming in and out, and they are built specifically to be able to handle all of that flow. So it makes sense from a deal perspective, from a comp perspective, that's how that would line up, where one company comes in 2005 and they say, we're the jack of all trades, we do all this, that they start to float towards a segment because you're building 3 different products otherwise, essentially. And for a company that gets this, which is why you're saying, RevOps as an entity, as a notion, has spiked in recent years as technology has changed, there's all sorts of things. That comp payout is like it has to be clockwork. Cannot be, you're going to lose employees. Like, you're going to lose salespeople if you're not paying them out well. Everyone's time is going to be wasted figuring out what was right, what was wrong. And like in my world, I help to build sales teams. That's what I do. I go to a company, they need a revenue thing. Like, I build the team, we hire them, we coach them, etc. And one of the big value props I've noticed is that I allow everyone else to do their job. At a startup, you may bring somebody in who's a RevOps person, a CRO, enablement. But when it's a small team, everybody's doing a little bit of everything. So you can't hire the RevOps specialist. You need to hire somebody who's a jack of all trades, who's very good at RevOps, but also can help with managing a sales team or coaching or anything like that. So when you have something in place like Qobra, where comp is taken care of, it makes sense. And especially in the enterprise capacity where it's more complex, I imagine there are organizations where, like you said, at LinkedIn, where you have an army of people working at this. At a smaller enterprise, you may have 3 people whose entire job is to manage that payroll. That frees you up to hire the people that you need a specialist in, and have Qobra take care of this like clockwork. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. And that's why we focus on companies that are from 200 to 1,000 full-time employees. So usually it's companies that have 30, maybe 50 minimum, up to 300 sales reps, because it's really the size where we found our best product market fit. We also have more bigger clients. We also have smaller clients, but everyone has an ICP, and ours is really just there. And usually there is small RevOps teams of a few people, up to 10 maybe maximum, that have the right resources to implement Qobra and take care of it, while not having to spend too much time on it either, because the platform is really easy to use.
That makes sense. Well, now I want to ask you a question. I think it'll be probably pretty helpful to the listeners here. So Qobra is helping to facilitate payouts to salespeople as they're closing deals. In your position, you probably also see a lot of different compensation structures. You're seeing what's working, you're seeing what's not working, in terms of incentivizing sales teams. I think today, in marketing and sales, there's a lot that's unknown. Like, the revenue world is not in like a stable place. There's a lot that's still being figured out post-pandemic. What are you seeing in terms of comp that is working well for companies? What are you seeing that's not working? What are you seeing that's fading thing you're not going to see anymore in 2 years?
So usually simplicity wins. And the main mistake I see in sales compensation structures is when companies over-engineer the thing. And every company has to take care of cash flow, has to generate revenue, has to have clients renewing, has to have employees staying at the company. But if you try to incorporate everything in your comp plan, so you have clawback if the deal then churns, or you split the payments if the client is paying monthly, or XYZ, this just creates a mess that is then impossible to explain to the reps. So the best practices that I have when it comes to sales comp is first starting with what's the organization, and thinking about this before thinking about comp. So do you have SDRs? Yes, no. Where is the handover? What do each people need to do? Same thing between AEs and CSM. So you need to have these very clearly mapped out, and then you can think about the comp plan. And the right way to think about it is, what is the number 1 and maybe number 2 KPI that is defining the success of that person in this role? And for each of these KPIs, maximum 2, is there a target that you can give to them? So you start building this. And so if we take a company that is, so to give you a very, very practical example, take a company that is selling mid-market. So they have 3 months sales cycle. What I've seen working the most is you give them a yearly quota or quarterly quotas if you want to have velocity, and you pay monthly based on attainment of that quota. Why paying monthly? Because it gives a rhythm and motivation for the rep. Every month, if I close, I get paid. While having the right performance measurement, which is quota attainment based on either the quarter or the year. And then you can add 2 things that I like in compliance. The first one is accelerators, decelerators. So if you are above target, you get paid at an even higher rate, and you can have multiple tiers. And decelerators, which is the opposite, when you're behind targets, you're paid less, but like doubled. So that's one thing. And then contract booster based on the quality of the contract. So if the contract is a multi-year contract, then you can maybe pay this deal 10% more. So if the base rate is 10%, it gets to 11% for that deal. If the contract is multi-year and paid upfront, it's even better. So you can get to 13% commission rates. And if you just incorporate these rules, that's quite simple, and that's what works most of the time, I see.
So let me ask you a logistical question. So you were saying, this might even just be for my education, for a mid-market company, let's say, and just like you were describing, and they have a quarterly goal, and you're paying them out on sales as they're pacing to the goal. Is that what you were saying? How do you do that? Is that based on their pipeline to know if they're pacing towards the goal?
So let's take one quarter. So imagine that you have $100,000 to generate on this quarter. And if you reach this number, you are paid 10K. So very easy numbers. If you reach 100, you get paid 10K for being quarter. So let's say that in January, you close 30K. So you would get paid 3K, maybe less because of the accelerator, but let's say 3K. Then in February, you are now at 70% quarter achievement. So you close 70K. So you get paid 7K, but you already get paid 3. So you will get 4K of commission in February. So that's what I call pacing. It's you look at the quarter at the end of each month, and based on your rules, you're saying, okay, how much should I be paid? And you get paid that amount minus what you already been paid that quarter.
Okay, so there is a deduction if you don't hit it as opposed to what you were making. So you can keep it honest over the course of the quarter, the half, the year.
It's really while you progress during your quarter or year, at the end of each month, you are paid. You will have been paid between Jan and the given month. You will have been paid what you would have been owed if you was about to stop here, for example.
And then if you miss that, there's a deduction on what you'd be paid on that following quarter.
No, not necessarily. It's really so if you can have a yearly quota and still be paid monthly, that's just what I recommend. So every month you get paid, but the quota remains yearly.
No, I get that. That makes sense. I'm thinking also because I've seen a lot of the time where you're getting paid what your commission rate is. That's what it is. And if you're missing the quota, it doesn't affect the commission rate necessarily. It affects, are you keeping the job? Are you going on a probation period or something along, if you miss the quota 2 months in a row, again, let's say I'm hitting 50, the quota is 100,000. And let's say I'm hitting 50,000 every quarter. I'll get the 5,000 because it's that 10% commission, but my job is now on the line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, usually that's way it works. And what I recommend with decelerators and accelerators, it's if you hit 50, as you said, when the quota is 100, you don't get paid 5, you get paid maybe only 2 because payout is decelerated before target achievement.
Well, that makes sense. And, I'm thinking, glad we talked this out because the way I was understanding it was, can I get the quota adjusts? But I didn't hear anything about like your job being in question or probation or getting fired, which is not your wheelhouse. Your wheelhouse is just compensation. And I was thinking if that's all that's happening is your your payouts being adjusted, you could end up with a lot of sellers who are what we call bottom feeders. And they're just happy to take home the base salary. They're happy to get the minimal commission. They're not trying to get any higher. They're like fine with this. And that's so detrimental to a sales team. Whereas I agree with you. I think simplicity is key. And I think there's also, I'm thinking sales leadership, there's a carrot and a stick, like when you lead a horse. One, the commission they're chasing, and they're also afraid of getting slapped if they're going too slow. So I guess that kind of that may not even be a with the times thing. That's just a universal, timeless simplicity is key. Even the same in sales, when you're trying to close a deal, you're trying to frame your offering up as this is a simple offering. And then if you get to the price and the price is really complicated, they're going to lose trust. It just doesn't make sense. Why would something that's being framed as simple now be really complex? And similarly, if you're trying to incentivize me and there are 5 different levers for me to get whatever, it's hard to keep in mind. And then I'm just going to sell whatever the hell this is and just kind of hope that it's hitting a certain metric. realistically. And then I might just be frustrated at the end of the year when it's not what I was under an assumption that it was.
It's really like the reason why sales compensation exists is because, yeah, it's motivating for the reps, and the comp scheme will drive the behavior. So if your comp scheme is not understood, then you can understood why the behavior is not the one you would expect to be.
Totally. Now, I liked something you said before, how comp is really something that you can weaponize, that you can make it, that you can really, again, kind of influence the behaviors, influence the emphasis in certain pitches. And I think that's kind of like what we're talking about here. By incentivizing the right thing, you can really dictate a specific action. Now, this is what I'm going to bring up next is something that I've been thinking about. And this might be in our wheelhouse of conversation, it might not, but we edit these episodes, we can take it out. I'm curious to get your take because you live in this world of sales compensation, of setting the right metrics to drive certain behaviors. And, you're coming from this engineering background. You've been in this world really well. You know what's working for mid-market, for enterprise, what's not working when it comes to compensating these folks, what the problems are. But I want to bring something up that's theoretical, and I'm curious if you have a take. If not, no sweat, no harm, no foul. But I was talking with a rep recently, and I think this is a common thing where when a rep is talking to a client, they put the client up on a pedestal. Do you know what I mean? They start being on their best behavior. They don't act like themselves. They're just trying to appease the client. And it's an unfortunate thing because when you go into that mode, you become very unconvincing. They become skeptical of you. They feel like you're trying to butter them up to do something. Whereas my thought, and why is that? Why do we look up to the client? Because if we think about it, if there was no quota, if there was no commission plan, if I'm a salesperson and I get paid a base salary and that's it, it doesn't matter how many people I close, it doesn't matter how many people I lose. If that's my set, and now I'm talking to a potential client, who's the one who's got the leverage? Is it me or is it the client? And I think it's me, the salesperson, because they have a problem they don't know how to solve. I have a solution for it. So in that dynamic, they should actually, in theory, be talking up to me. And I'm the one who holds the high ground. Whereas I think when comp comes into play, it flips because the salesperson, you may need my product, but I need the sale. I need to hit this certain number for a zillion reasons, to keep my job, to make the money that I wanted to make, to feel proud of myself. So I start talking up to you, pleading, will you, thank you for your time. Thank you so much for your time. They get weak. And so I just thought it's what an interesting shift where if there was a world where there's no compensation, the seller has all the power. The buyer has no power because I don't need you to buy. It doesn't matter to me if you buy or if you walk away. I can solve your problem. It's up to you if you want it or not. And I was wondering if you've ever thought down that path. Is there a better way to incentivize salespeople where it's not a quota that naturally puts the weight and makes them so dependent on the client and desperate from the client to hit that quota? Again, theoretical, but I've wondered, is there a better way? The answer is I don't know, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
My thought here, yes, is there is no clear better way. And let me explain a bit. So you mentioned 3 reasons why a rep would be scared to lose the contract. You mentioned fear of not making money, fear of losing the job, and willingness to feel proud of yourself as a rep. And the reality is, if there was no commission scheme, the number 2 and number 3 would still be here. Because even in companies where you have no variable compensation, and I've seen a few for sales reps, the sales that don't sell, they end up being fired. So this will remain the same. And the rep, even if there's no commission, if you don't sell, it means that you're progressing. So in terms of perception of yourself, the same thing. So it only adds up one thing, which is something that is very material and that cannot be forgotten. Of course, it brings winning, earning or not earning money. That's what I like about the job of sales. It's the best job to have a correlation between your results and the money you earn. Think about an entrepreneur. So Personally, as a CEO, I have some variable compensation, but that's not the majority of my salary, quite far from it. And I could say, okay, if we sign this deal, I don't make money. So I don't really care if we close this deal or not. But the reality is, if I want to create value for the company, if I want to increase the valuation of the company, I need to make these sales. And every company will be in that situation. Every company will want to increase its valuation by selling more. So it means that whether you have variable compensation or not, if you make a sale, you create wealthiness for someone, for the shareholders. So if you think about it that way, then you can see that compensation is not a way to, should I say, put pressure on the rep to earn money. It's just a logical reward because that person who made the sale created money for the investors, and you're taking a part of this money to give the credit to the rep. So if you revert the thinking and see it that way, it means, wow, it's impossible to remove commissions.
Wait, so I'll tell you for the record, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree. And I'll tell you, there's a company that I'm working with, and they're not in the SaaS world. I'm not going to name names, but they're not in the SaaS industry. And they have a sales team that is unionized. So they're like, their jobs are really protected. They have really strong benefits. This company has no quota. They have no commission. Every one of their salespeople has been there forever. And their numbers are going down, 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 down every year to the point where they're losing money every year. It's like communism. Like nobody actually has to do the job, and therefore it's not getting done. And every year, the habits are getting a little bit worse. And they've even started, like the only reason that like they'll offer one client something at a certain price, me at that company, I'll go in and offer that same client something at the same thing at a lower price. Why? So that way it just shows that I'm doing my job. Like this is awful. Like this is absolute, like it's insanity to me. So I wholeheartedly agree. And sales is the most capitalistic, I think, job there is. It cannot be this, everybody gets paid base salary, and it would never work. But where I'm going with it is inherently, this is the same thing when you're dating. If you are gaga for the person that you're trying to court, that you want to meet, and you come across desperate, it's unattractive. When you are cooler and you can date me or you don't have to, I'm pretty cool, I'm good on my, like, it's very attractive. And similarly, when you're selling, when your attitude is, listen, I don't need this deal. Like, if this makes sense for you, I'll tell you. And if it doesn't make sense for you, like, I'm going to send you on your way. You're much more attractive to the potential client. And my feeling is, why do we put the client up on that pedestal? It's the two sides of the sword where that quota incentivizes me to make the next call to get the higher price from the client, but it also brings out the worst in me because I have to, you know? And so I've been wondering, similarly, reverse engineering, is there a way to incentivize still not paying a base salary and that's it? That I do not believe in, but is there some way to incentivize where that pressure is somehow alleviated? You sell better. Do you get where I'm going with this? And I don't know that there's a right. I don't know that there actually is, but like if there was, and I'm thinking even, okay, so then we have, you know, the comp in different tiers and your quota and adjusters and spiffs and all sorts of things to incentivize you to, like, listen, if you're going to be doing the desperate sale, then do it more, and do it more because it's a numbers game. And the more people that we get in the door, the more logos we get in the door, the better for, you know, then, okay, then if you can't beat them, join them. Then like, all right, then let's make them hustle. And I think that's the best we've got so far. You know, I don't know that there is a better way, but it was just that notion. And this is the sales coach in me thinking, why do people put them on a pedestal? And it is the quote. It's 1,000% the quota or the comp structure. But at the same time, it's also the same thing that's driving you to make that extra call when it's a Friday and you're tired, or to push that client where you're like, oh, I don't want that. You feel strange, but you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to try it. And 1 out of 5 times it happens. And then and again, I think this is totally theoretical. It's been something that's been racking my brain. Is there a better way? And I don't know that there is.
I don't know if this question will get solved in the next decades.
I feel like whoever solves this is going to make $1 billion, whoever solves that, because their team is going to be selling cooler than anybody else's, but still doing what they need to do the job. I don't know.
But that's how the best reps behave in all companies most of the time. They are like the top reps in every company. They are not the desperate ones. And I think it's really because when you start in sales, you're the new freshman, and it's your first time in sales, you have a natural tendency to behave like this. But if you have the right manager from day one with the right training, you will behave the way you need to behave to win, and this will be equaling the status of your prospects. And then the other thing is volume. If you do daily activities and you create your pipeline, then if you have like 20 deals, you can lose one. So that changes a lot until there is this very big deal that takes all over it.
Then I do agree with you. I think that I thought you put that really well. When you're a freshman in sales, or in like ready, let's say I moved from SMB to mid-market to enterprise. When I'm a freshman in any of these departments, I am looking up, I'm desperate because I don't know. I feel like I have no control, and that's scary. And so I'll talk up to clients hoping that they'll come my way. It's like a natural tendency. And I will say the teams that I'm coaching, the way that I tell them to go about sales is when you get them on the phone, first off, do not butter them up. Don't ask them, oh, how's the weather by you? Oh, because it's bullshit. Like you're creating skepticism with the client. You get on the phone and you say, why are we talking today? Like, why are we actually here? Nobody booked time to learn about accounting software because it sounds fun. There's something going on that you're trying to solve. So you book time with me and 7 other companies in this radius of your problem that you're hoping could. What is that problem? And you as the salesperson, it's your duty to figure out, can I help you or not? Like cut and dry. You have to be able to say no to a deal. If you can't help them, get them off the phone. And they may say, well, I want to hear what you do. Hang on a second. What's the point of me showing you what we do if it won't even help you? Like it's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. If I can't help you, I'll tell you and I'll give you a recommendation who might be able to. Now, on the flip side, if I can help you, it's my job to help you make the right decision. And by doing this, as opposed to selling everybody that comes in the door, if you think about it, you're going to talk to people that are sellable, and you're going to talk to people that aren't sellable. And if you try to sell everyone, you're spending half of your time on people that this would never make sense for anyway. Whereas if you're saying, I'm only talking to you if this makes sense, all of your effort is spent on the people that could and would and should close. And then when you're talking to them, you have more authenticity because you do know you can help them. This isn't bullshit. You're going to come across better. You're going to be more trustworthy, and you're going to get a higher percentage of the only people that are sellable, as opposed to you're selling everyone and the only ones you're going to close, you're hurting because you are coming across desperate. So I'm going along with that to saying maybe the only solution to that leverage problem really is proper management, is proper coaching. And I've seen this on the flip side where the manager is, and this is in a toxic environment where a manager isn't listening to their reps' calls. They're not working with them on deals. They're saying, where is it? Where is it? You're below your quota. You're below your quota. And then what do you start doing when you panic? You doggy paddle, right? And then you're not going to actually, hey, dude, don't worry. I know there are waves, but if you just one arm in front of the other, you're going to make it there. And then you see that it's making track. Guess maybe that is it, that the quota has to be, but it's that proper leadership management with the right intentions can flip that mentality entirely and then put the salesperson in a better position, which makes them feel in control of the client interaction as opposed to the other way around. And then likely with that, your day, your mental health, you're more in control. You feel better about yourself. You're in a power position. Whereas as opposed to you see that client join the call and you go, oh, hi, and you're just pathetic. I'm voicing out like a lot of thoughts here, but does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think one of the responsibilities of management also is to not set quotas too high, because that creates tension. Someone that I know quite well, Colin Cadmus, is quite active on LinkedIn, by the way, and he's making a case for reducing quotas and not increasing them all the time. And I like that and I'm the first in my company to want to have achievable quotas, which can just sound like obvious to say, but there's a ton of companies where it's not the case. And if you have, let's say that the real attainment, expected attainment is 100, I'm sure that if you make an experience and you have a company where the target is 90, this company might end up doing more sales than the company where the quota is 110.
Well, you know what? Here's another interesting one for somebody is pick your quota, right? Like, think about it this way. In theory, all of us, the majority of humans have the necessary muscles, bones, brain, blood vessels to run a marathon. In theory, like we have that capability. But if you ask most people, all right, go run a marathon, they're not going to be able to. It's just not going to happen. But if you tell most people, for example, run a half a kilometer or half a mile, they could probably do that. And then that quota is the half. And then, hey, you got comfortable on that. If you want to move up to 1, you can. And then upping where your comfort level is. And I'm saying starting from the bottom, of course, but that way the company knows what they can expect from each person, and each person knows that their promise back to the company, what they'll deliver, is reasonable. And then comes the carrot leading the way of you can make more. You are doing this. You just ran 13 miles. You probably can run 14. It's a little more work, but it's a lot more payout. You probably could. And I don't know, you could even probably tie a base salary to that. If you're expecting only to make this, then the base salary is going to be here, but it's going to be very easy to keep the job. And I wonder if there's something to that where the salesperson feels very in control and they're going up, and there's never we set the quota at this and nobody's hitting it. And now they're all confused and pissed. I've been on teams where they've set the quota really high and I was the top performer by miles and I'm not even close to my quota. And so then the thought around the sales team is, well, nobody's hitting their quota. All right. And now the whole quota is just not helping. It's not motivating. It's creating confusion. It's creating a lack of trust in the company. Maybe there's something.
But let's not frighten too much CROs. And let's not tell them that they should ask every rep on their team how much they can achieve and set the quotas that way, because there would be a lot of heart attacks, I think.
I think you're probably right. But I think, hey, we might be onto something here. I don't know. You know what? You've got the data. You'll tell me one day. All right. So Antoine, believe it or not, we are at time. Is anything else you want to share with the audience? Anything exciting about Qobra? Anything you're doing you just want to, final last words?
Yeah. If you just want to hear a bit more about us and also see the product, you can, of course, ask for a demo. And if you want to connect with me directly, you can just shoot me an invitation on LinkedIn. We're one of the very exciting European startups, I think. And when I say European startups, it's not going to be for long, because we're more and more going after the US markets. We have lots of customers out here, and we're going to open an office here. Not right now, but very soon. So there's some great companies that have started in Europe and that are now global. It's going to be our case. So you can follow us to see the news in the coming months and years.
Antoine, great having you in the show. We'll have to have you back. And hey, you know what? Maybe when you move to the States, we'll do a live episode and maybe we'll have some drinks over it.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Take care. And that's a wrap on Closing Conversations. Huge thanks to Antoine Fort for the clarity on compensation, simple rules, fast payouts, and trust over tricks. If this episode helped, hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a CRO, RevOps leader, or founder who needs a cleaner plan. For more on building sales teams that deliver, head to www.commissionsales.com. I'm Max Notis. We'll see you next time. And until then, let's get closing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, you can always catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more episodes of Closing Conversations.